Welcome to Radio Stranahan, special weekend Libertarian presidential candidate edition. I had the good fortune to spend some time with presidential candidate Gary Johnson, probably the only presidential candidate I'm going to be spending a lot of time with this season. I have a feeling that Barack Obama and I will not be spending a lot of time together, and Mitt seems a little busy. You know, my political background, when I was a teenager, I was libertarian. And then I just got out of any interest in politics in my 20s. And then I was on the left when I was in my 30s and 40s, I guess. I was a liberal for a long time. And then, you know, after meeting Andrew Breitbart, I stopped being a liberal because I saw way too much of what I considered dishonesty on the left. Well, it's not even what I consider dishonesty. I'm being a little polite there. What was dishonesty? It was actual dishonesty. And after Andrew left, you know, I thought about it. And at that point I was saying I'm not a liberal. Pretty quickly I was saying I wasn't a liberal, because I didn't want to be identified with the stuff that I saw when I was investigating Pigford. And I said, well, I'm independent. And then after Andrew left, I was like, well, you know, if he was a conservative, I guess I'm a conservative. And I feel a sense of loyalty and obligation to Andrew to continue the work we were doing together and that I thought we'd be doing together, quite honestly, for years to come, which was, you know, exposing the left and fighting for the values that Andrew was fighting for. And I realized that, like I say, if Andrew Breitbart was a conservative, then I'm a conservative. So it was interesting seeing Gary Johnson speak and talking to him. After hearing his positions, and after hearing this interview, I'm more convinced than ever that I'm a conservative. You know, and honestly, I was open to having, because I was going to be spending time with Governor Johnson, I was open to, well, you know, I consider myself a libertarian-leaning conservative, and I am, and you know that means on a few specific issues, you know, drug legalization, for instance. I do take a libertarian position on that because I just think the war on drugs has been a massive failure. It's a perfect example. On other issues though, I take sort of I don't even know. I mean, to me, it's a sort of libertarian position, like same-sex marriage, for instance. I'm more or less in favor of same-sex marriage, but boy, I see the problems there. And I see the problems, and we talked about this in the interview a little bit, as creep, you know, of what people like the Obama administration want to do with something like same-sex marriage. It does seem like, to me, it's a way to get the church-state separation out of the way. Like they want to use it to use fair employment laws, for instance, as a way to encroach on church-state separation. And I don't think their motives are good there. But anyway, you know, foreign policy is another issue where same with immigration. You know, I just don't agree with libertarian positions on immigration or on foreign policy. And spending the time with Governor Johnson sort of confirmed that to me. There's clearly a real, and you can see it, Johnson, at one point I asked him how his positions are different than Ron Paul's, and they're not that different. And he says that. He's very upfront about it. So anyway, it was an interesting experience for me. I do appreciate, as I say in the interview, I appreciate Governor Johnson giving me the time he did. He was very gracious, and I will say the area I agree with him in is I'm not sure that the two-party system is serving us real well right now. And I do think that the influence of the Libertarian Party has been very, very good for Republicans. And I'm a more ideas not less ideas person. And so, it's interesting. I interview a socialist, one day, and then Libertarian candidate another day. So this was recorded back on Thursday morning in a van. I'm going to play the interviews in 2 chunks, and that's going to take up most of the rest of the show. Let's listen to part 1 of my interview with Governor Gary Johnson. All right, we're here with Governor Gary Johnson, and first off, Governor, thanks very much for taking the time. Can you just talk a little bit about, just so people know your background, how did you get into politics initially, and then how did you end up being the Libertarian candidate for president?
Well, I've been an entrepreneur my entire life, which I think is really important. Understanding what it takes to grow a business from 1 person to 1,000 people. I think that's a key ingredient, really, to this equation. And politics. I'd never been involved in politics before, prior to running for governor of New Mexico. I've always believed politics high calling, the notion of doing good by others. I've come to recognize that doing good by others is very, very subjective. Depending on who you talk to, I may be the scourge of the earth. I understand that. But as the Libertarian nominee for president, I believe that my voice is representative of the fastest growing segment of American politics today, and that would be for those that call themselves libertarian in any capacity. I'm a libertarian-leaning Democrat, libertarian-leaning Republican. I'm libertarian-leaning. I'm a libertarian. Well, I'm representing those people. I'll also point out the obvious. People that label themselves as libertarian don't vote libertarian. I'm asking that just this one time that people vote libertarian, this one time, and give me a chance here at changing a system that really doesn't really make any difference who we elect. We seem to continue to erode our civil liberties. We seem to be in a state of perpetual war, military intervention, and we continue to rack up unsustainable debt that will have a consequence at some point, and the way that we avoid that is to actually balance the federal budget and spend within our means.
Now, so let's just talk about the landscape of American politics right now. Obviously, the Tea Party was considered a factor a couple of years ago. They've been sort of diminished by the press, but I think it's obvious from what we saw in Wisconsin recently, and even I think the nomination of Paul Ryan shows that the Tea Party is still a factor in Republican politics. What's your opinion of the Tea Party?
Well, my opinion of the Tea Party is if we're talking about dollars and cents, if we're talking about balancing the federal budget, if we're talking about getting spending under control and actually addressing the debt that we currently have, I'm a Tea Partier. The Tea Party is totally relevant if that's what the Tea Party focuses on, and I just hope they continue to focus on that.
So that's I take it what you mean there is as opposed to social issues.
Exactly. That I think the lure of the Tea Party from day one, and I think that the majority of people in this country who would label themselves a Tea Partier would label themselves that on the basis of being fiscally conservative, of being fiscally responsible.
So when you started the race, you were running as a Republican, and Ron Paul was also running. How do you see a differentiation between yourself and Ron Paul? What's the difference?
I really don't. I think that we're both talking about the same message, and his candidacy is going to officially come to an end here in just a few weeks. And so where does the voice go for the liberty movement? Well, the voice becomes that of the Libertarian nominee for president, who happens to be me.
Now, what did you know? As we're recording this, Paul Ryan was just nominated last weekend. Do you have any what do you think about Ryan as the VP nominee? Was it a good move for Romney, do you think, or?
Well, initially, I thought it was a terrific pick, and I still think it's a terrific pick. I mean, the notion that Paul Ryan is considered to be the boldest of Republicans, that's a good thing. But the reality is that it doesn't balance the budget for 30 years, that the spending levels that Paul Ryan is proposing end up to be higher than under Bill Clinton, and I'm not talking about numbers now, I'm talking about percentages. Is it really going to change anything? I think at the end of the day, that if you're talking about, I do not want to be critical of Obama or Romney or Paul Ryan or Joe Biden. I just think that politics in this country is very status quo, and that regardless of who we elect, things just don't change. And in this case, hey, I think people understand that we cannot continue to militarily intervene in other countries' affairs, that civil liberties are really important, that we have a growing police state in this country, and hasn't that been why we fought wars, is to prevent a police state in this country? And then lastly, I think people really understand that we have an unsustainable debt, an unsustainable deficit that has to be addressed now. I don't think either party either of the major old parties addresses those issues.
Well, yeah, and I want to talk about the issues in a second, but, one of the things that the left has tried to characterize Paul Ryan as, they've tried to talk about his connection to Ayn Rand. He's mentioned that he was influenced by the, novelist and philosopher Ayn Rand, and she's obviously been an impactful figure on the libertarian movement for the past 50 years or so. Did Ayn Rand have any influence on your thinking at all as you were coming up, or?
Yeah, well, I like to think of my arrival into being a libertarian had everything to do with my own instincts and the fact that I resent being told what to do as long as my actions don't interfere or put others in harm's way. I resent anybody telling me what I should do. So for me, Ayn Rand really just put into words, I guess, the way that I felt, and I've always felt that the way that I contribute most to other people's lives is to be the best that I can possibly be, and I think Ayn Rand in her writings epitomized that.
Now, when you were so now let's talk policy for a second. What would a Gary Johnson presidency look like?
Well, it would be very transparent, and I think that what you would see is you'd see a discussion and a debate on the issues like we haven't seen in my lifetime. And in terms of what you would do with, for instance, I was at Red State Gathering a couple weeks ago, and someone who was speaking there pointed out, they said, look, even when Republicans have gotten in office, they said, what departments have we gotten rid of? and that got a very good reaction from the audience, and he raises a good point. So let's take that, for instance. What departments would you get rid of? Anything? Well, I am advocating, and of course, getting rid of departments has to do with Congress submitting those eliminations and then me signing on to them. But I am open to the discussion of eliminating any federal agency. I'm absolutely into that debate and that discussion. But those that I'm advocating today would be the Department of Education, Housing and Urban Development, and Homeland Security.
Now, what's your feeling about, you talk about Homeland Security, what's your feeling on the Patriot Act?
I would not have signed the Patriot Act, and I would like to repeal the Patriot Act. I would have never signed the National Defense Authorization Act, allowing for detainment or arrest and detainment of you and I as U.S. citizens without being charged. I think that's why we fought wars in this country.
Now, you as a libertarian, you take the libertarian stand on defense, which, for instance, you spoke last night. You're against the idea that people are talking about bombing Iran, for instance, correct?
Well, bombing of any country should have a basis in imminent threat or being attacked. And I think at the top of the list for determining imminent attack or being attacked should come from Congress. That it's just too big of an issue for one person, the President of the United States, to be engaged in. And because the President of the United States has been engaged in being able to make these decisions, I think has us in this state of perpetual war.
Now, do you take what's your feeling on defense? You're not taking a pacifist position, right?
No, I think we should have a strong. I think it's the fundamental obligation of government to provide us with a strong national defense. I just think that defense is the operative word here, not offense, not nation building. I think the biggest threat to our national security is the fact that we are borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar that we're spending. And that when we talk about a 43% reduction in military spending, we're only talking about going back to 2003 levels.
Right. So is that what you're proposing, basically, to go back to that?
Yes, and talking about military reduction of 43%. Well, that would be a reduction in the military footprint that we have worldwide, the bases that we have worldwide, the military personnel that we have stationed in Europe, Japan, South Korea. A reduction of that footprint, 43%, getting ourselves out of all of the military engagements that we are currently involved in, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, end our military interventions, a reduction in nuclear warheads from 2,300 to 500, research and development, intelligence, military in uniform, and the support staff that goes along with the military in uniform. All of those categories looking to reduce by 43%. And the promise, I'm making a promise that as President of the United States, I will submit a budget with a 43% reduction in current government spending. Spend within our means.
Now, Romney has said that he would repeal Obamacare on day one. How bad do you think Obamacare is? Do you think it's a threat beyond just what's in the bill? Or?
Well, first of all, just speaking the obvious, the President of the United States cannot repeal President Obama's health care plan. When it comes to implementation of President Obama's health care plan, I think that effectively a lot of what is in that bill could be there could be waivers issued to states, for example, to make it less onerous. I happen to think that President Obama's health care plan is a torpedo in a sinking ship, and we're the sinking ship, and it's just more money that we're going to spend to hasten what inevitably will be a monetary collapse. But I'd like to point out that when Republicans controlled both houses of Congress and the presidency here a few short years ago, that they did pass a prescription health care benefit, which at that time was the largest entitlement program in the history of the country, only surpassed by President Obama's health care plan.
So you're saying both sides really played politics with?
Yeah, absolutely. Mitt Romney right now is saying that it's really important to balance the federal budget. I agree with that. But he said that he also says that we should hold Medicare intact and that we should increase our spending for the military. Well, it doesn't add up. I'm sorry. It doesn't add up. It can't be done.
So I've interviewed Judge Jim Gray before on the topic of drug legalization, and one of the points that he made in the interview is just how the drug war ties into the size of government. And I know that's one of the, obviously by bringing Gray on as your vice presidential candidate, you're dealing with somebody who's a real strong advocate for drug legalization, although not a drug user at all in any way. That was one of the things I found interesting about Gray. How do you see the war on drugs as fitting into the overall size of government?
Well, I think it's very, very significant in that half of what we spend on law enforcement, the courts, and the prisons is drug-related. And to what end? We're arresting 1.8 million people a year in this country, and we now have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world, and we have, in terms of numbers, we have the highest incarceration number, 2.3 million people behind bars. I happen to believe that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition-related, not use-related. That's not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that ought to be the focus.
Now, Joe Biden recently made comments saying to a largely black audience that Romney was going to put them in chains. And there's really been, in my opinion, a lot of racial divisiveness from the Obama administration. What do you see as a Libertarian candidate? What do you see as the issue of race, how it fits into our politics?
Well, I think, regrettably, it does fit into that it plays a part in politics today, but that it shouldn't. So, as the Libertarian, it is the Libertarian truly has no colored glasses on at all.
Now, when you, as I mentioned before, when you came into the race, you were Republican, and now you're running as Libertarian. Did running as a Libertarian change what you talked? I mean, are you a different person?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
No. What I'm talking about, it remains the same. It's just terrific to not have to offer. It's terrific to not have to offer up excuses for why I'm a Republican when in fact I'm a Libertarian.
Now, why were you a Republican?
Really, I think that I'm speaking broadly now. I think the majority of Americans that describe themselves as Republican because of dollars and cents. Because Republicans are supposed to be better on dollars and cents. Well, I'm in that broad category. I happen to care about civil liberties also very passionately. I am very socially accepting. I think, speaking with a broad brushstroke, that the majority of Americans fall in that category. Socially accepting, fiscally responsible. For the most part, the fiscally responsible people, for the most part, are Republicans. For the most part, those that are socially accepting are Democrats. Why not be a Libertarian and be the best of both? Combine both of the two, because they're both important.
Well, when I've talked to a number of conservatives, for instance, on the issue of same-sex marriage, a lot of them have said to me, they said, I don't really care who people marry. One of their concerns is that they fear that it's going to then become the government dictating to a church, let's say, what it can and can't do. And I think that given some of the Obama administration's maneuvers against churches, that's not a crazy concern on their part. But I mean, as a Libertarian, you wouldn't. Obviously, that doesn't fit into your.
No, I think that. I think, getting back to the example that you just cited, if this fellow really doesn't care about or is not concerned about who should or shouldn't get married and supports that notion, why not support it? But I think the issue gets obfuscated by trying to lay this off on an erosion, if you will. We're not talking about an erosion of values here. We're talking about the basis for this country, which is equality for everyone. Now,
you're just sort of starting a tour right now. We're here in Texas. Where's the tour going to be taking you, and how long are you going to be on the road till the election? Or?
Oh, well, no, through Sunday of this week in Texas, and we will be headed to Austin. We'll be headed to San Antonio, and then Houston from here in Dallas.
And are you planning a travel around the rest of the country? I mean, you're obviously running for president, but I mean.
Yeah, well, so I've been to 38 states at this point, and not that that's so important, but yes, every single day. This is a 24/7 endeavor.
And now, for people who are worried about, people hear, well, you're wasting your vote or something like that if you don't vote for one of the two major parties. What's your response on that?
Well, I think the wasted vote is if you're going to compromise your own values, and I think the way you change the world is to vote for the candidate that's most in line with your views, and that's assuming that you're voting for a candidate that can actually back up what they're saying with action. And I don't think there is anything in my resume to not suggest that I'm not going to doggedly pursue what I'm talking about.
Great. Okay, Governor Johnson, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
There you go. It's my interview with presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, Gary Johnson, former governor of Mexico. Once again, I want to thank Liz and the governor for helping set that up. Now, I also did a video interview with Governor Johnson where we talk about other issues. We get into that issue of wasting your vote a little bit more. We also talk about homeschooling. We talk about education. And I asked a question that Roseanne Barr sent me as well, asking about a private police force. Those videos will be out soon. You should be able to see some of them on my website, Stranahan.com, or on Breitbart.com. But anyway, there you go. You've heard the governor look into the candidates. I think make up your own mind. And I do agree with that. Vote your conscience. Anyway, till next time, I'm Lee Stranahan. Thanks very much for listening. I do agree with that. Vote your conscience. Anyway, till next time, I'm Lee Stranahan. Thanks very much for listening. I do agree with that. Vote your conscience.